This week I finally got around to beating all of the bosses in Dark Souls 3, and the last boss that I beat was the Nameless King, an optional boss in an optional area some would argue is the hardest boss fight in the entire game, and I would probably agree with that. But because he was the last guy that I fought in that game, I also noticed that he greatly resembled a boss from another game that I recently beat, and that boss is Demise from The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And I just wanted to make a really quick video discussing a few of the similarities between these two encounters and whether or not the director from Dark Souls 3 and from Software drew inspiration from this boss fight. Miyazaki has gone on record saying that he is a fan of the Legend of Zelda series, so I thought it could be possible that he drew inspiration from this. Something important to keep in mind throughout this video is that for the most part I'm going to be comparing the second phase of both of these boss fights. That's where most of the similarities are. The first phase of both of these boss fights are very, very different. The Nameless King, he's on a dragon, and in the Demise boss fight, you're doing the typical Skyward Sword hack and slash, try to get around the enemy's sword that you see throughout the entire game. So those two sections are very, very different. Obviously the setting is still the same, but those are not the phases that I'm going to be comparing. The first connection and parallel between these two boss fights, and in my opinion, just the biggest connection, is the setting where you actually encounter both of these bosses. It takes place in this very limbo-ish atmospheric area where you're not on the earth, you're up in the sky, and there isn't really much going on around you besides a lot of thunderstorms and clouds. And due to there not really being any distractions around you, it's a very isolating boss fight. You feel alone. You get this very mano-a-mano sense where it's just you against this boss, and you're fighting for survival, and you're fighting to defeat them, and there's nothing else going on. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It's just mano-a-mano. And the second biggest connection, I think you probably noticed just looking at these clips here, is that both of these bosses greatly resemble each other in just their overall design. Both of them have very large swords, and they're both bulky male characters, but their most prominent feature is probably their hair. It's very long and flowing, almost resembling something out of an episode of Dragon Ball Z. I think that they resemble each other so much that if you were to kind of cut them out and do a silhouette like you're seeing here, if you were to show them to anyone who wasn't too familiar with the game, they would probably assume that these are both the same character or maybe different iterations of the same character. And the third connection and parallel between these two boss fights is the use of lightning. Still kind of connected with the setting, but I thought it was something worth pointing out that both encounters use some form of lightning. The Nameless King has a constantly buffed lightning sword that does devastating amount of damage, whereas Demise, during the second phase of the fight, uses his Skyward Sword strike to summon down a lightning bolt, energize his weapon, buffing it temporarily in order to do a lot more damage with a regular attack, or unleash it as some kind of an energy blast which stuns Link for a little bit. Those are the three major points. Maybe you guys can spot a couple more that I didn't see, or maybe you think that this is just a happy coincidence and that two developers from very different games happen to make very similar boss fights. But in my opinion, I think because Miyazaki is a proclaimed Legend of Zelda fan, that he would want to pay respect to that franchise in some way. He probably grew up with it. To take a boss fight from one of those games and not so much replicate it, but mirror it in his own style, in that crude and cruel Dark Souls style, is really cool to see, and I think the game industry as a whole could use a little bit more of that, paying homage to franchises that developers love. And I know that there are Easter eggs and things throughout different games referencing previous games, but replicating an entire boss fight in your own style is something that I don't think gets done too often. And I really think it's awesome. I hope that I'm right, and let me know your opinions and thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear maybe some things that I missed, maybe some things that you disagree with. Let me know. And I hope to make more videos like this in the future, so please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.